So we'll move along now. And the next item on the agenda, we had planned a panel discussion. And I think in the normal course of things, we have the panel sitting at the front. But obviously we're rather constrained by our system here. So I think that as the discussion develops, we'll just have to have people come up here and make their comments. And so the title of this session was Predicting the Future, Local Realities, Global Pressures and Research Directions. So I think, that can be a little bit of a starting point for our discussion. But also I'd like to hand over now to my colleague Níels Einarsson, who's director of the Stefansson Arctic Institute here, but currently visiting professor in Tromsø. And he's going to start us off, as it were, with some thoughts. Níels.
Thank you, Astrid. I must say that after this tour de force of that Peter presented us with, my head is slightly spinning, but that's only natural. We're dealing with complex issues, and I think that is also very much in nonsense spirit, to keep in mind that we need to avoid simplifications, and we need to be aware of that the issues we are dealing with are complex. And someone brought up the important notion of environmental determinism. Environmental determinism does not, or reductionism, doesn't really help us very much in understanding the Arctic or the changes taking place, because the climate is probably the most important driving factor of change. It definitely does not foresee or predict or steer the way people adapt or how they react to stress of the kind that climatic factors provide. And also because we've been talking about perception and how we talk about things and how that shapes both policy, foreign policy, geopolitics, as well as definitely local reactions. So I think I think we have conceptually we have covered a lot of ground here at this seminar. Perhaps being an anthropologist, I guess I always want to remind people when they're talking about the Arctic, and it's not necessary here. We're sort of here. I would be preaching to the already converted. We don't need to remind ourselves that we have people living in the Arctic. Whereas I sometimes have the feeling in some of these discourses, such as, for example, in Europe, and I sometimes have I've had EU delegations coming to visit, and I sometimes have the feeling that people are not quite aware of the fact that we've had different groups of human beings living and quite successfully adapting to the circumpolar Arctic and the high north for thousands of years, even tens of thousands of years. And these are people we can learn a lot from. So it's not just polar bears or penguins, as some of them think. Definitely not. So it's the human dimension. I think that's also perhaps is when Norwegians and Icelanders meet. I think we always have this human dimension in the backs of our heads. But we might actually be slightly more, sometimes I think, more open about this aspect of how we perceive the Arctic. And we have a long history actually of engagement in terms of tourism, if you will, or at least migration. Our forefathers, 1,000 years ago, actually settled the biggest island on Earth, Greenland, and lived there for 500 years. So we have a number of common denominators: historical, ecological, obviously, and now in terms of our reliance on natural resources. In Iceland, living resources; in Norway, dead resources, although of course also living resources. I believe that 17% of your export comes from fish products. Now I just want to, I have a couple of things that I want our panel to reflect upon, and you can feel free to pick any of these issues, because so there's no obligatory need for you to cover everything. I wanted to ask you to perhaps sort of identify urgent research gaps in knowledge that you think that a bilateral or research cooperation could sort of beneficially address or usefully contribute to. I also wanted to wanted to ask you to comment on the problem of all this enormously increased attention that the region is receiving internationally, and potential problems or prospects that this might entail, and how perhaps researchers, science, can be an enlightening agent in this attention, influencing perceptions and ways of talking about the region. And also, the third thing would be to ask you to discuss how research, perhaps in terms of interdisciplinary, in terms of engaging the Arctic inhabitants, and from many of our perspective, many of us see the main reason why we're engaging research is actually to contribute something useful, not necessarily policy driven, but perhaps policy relevant. And of course there is a thin line, but an important distinction. Politicians would often very much have us study this and that because they need that information for various purposes, either to seek truth or hide truth. They have different ways of using knowledge. So how can we actually, with our research, contribute to the welfare of Arctic inhabitants and understand the region better, the human dimension? It's very complex. Of course, in Iceland we are, I would absolutely not say privileged, but we do not have a native population that is in the ethno-political sense of the word. That's something that you have in Norway, and which, of course, is a very important part of how you direct and how you perceive Arctic problems. Although I know that genetic research has shown that we have a slight element of Sami in the Icelandic genetic pool, thankfully. So these are basically the three issues or topics that I wanted to invite you in the panel to talk about. If you want to concentrate on one, then that's fine. Cover all three, that's even better. So I think it would be very good to start with a very special guest we have, Anna Kertula from the National Science Foundation. She's head of the Arctic Social Science Program, and as we say, she's been visiting Iceland the past months as a visiting scholar and wearing other hats. And as we say in Iceland, keen is the eye of guest. And I know that your eye, Anna, is particularly keen. So if you would.
Thank you, Níels. And I want to thank the Stefansson Institute, the Ministries of Iceland and Norway, and Astrid Níels for organizing this and for inviting me to give some reflections. Níels, you came up with three very interesting issues. I, of course, am going to cover, I was listening to the talks, all of which were extremely interesting, and so I think I'll cover some of Níels' questions as I make some of my own comments. I wanted to start by saying I think that we can all see a theme, and Peter said it very well in his talk, in terms of what is becoming more and more in the U.S. called challenges and opportunities of the changing Arctic climate. And I think that certainly the secretaries of the ministries, when they spoke, talked a little bit about the challenges and opportunities. It was particularly nice to hear them talk about knowledge-based policy, how much our various governments actually do knowledge-based policy is left up to discussion, but at least it's nice to know that they're thinking about that. And I think as scientists we need to be aware that our research can affect public policy, and we need to be better at engaging policy as well as engaging the public at large. We're not very good at it. We don't like to do it. We like to think that policymakers want certainty, and we don't deal in certainties very well, and therefore we haven't engaged policy as much as we should. I think we're getting better at it, but I think that we can engage policy at a much stronger degree and think about how our scientific papers might be placed into a policy realm. And in fact, at the National Science Foundation in the U.S., we fund what we call broader impacts of our projects, which can range from education, including graduate students, all the way through to engaging policymakers in your science. I think that's an important thing for us to do, and at least in Norway and Iceland, your policymakers are open to that. I think another theme of this conference has been interdisciplinarity. I think we all represent a multiplicity of disciplines in this room. There was a wonderful range of papers from social science to paleoclimate to oceanography. I think what we need to think more about, there were a few papers, the Goose paper was obviously interdisciplinary research, biologists and social scientists working together, but I think these types of conferences are really important for bringing interdisciplinarity, which means everybody in this room has something that we can each learn from each other and probably gain a lot by talking to our colleagues here and making our projects more interdisciplinary. Astrid's work on climate, she works in an interdisciplinary environment, but it would be nice to see the paleoclimate record that was talked about yesterday in terms of the historic record and in terms of the climatological record that's being collected. As well, see various maps, have these people talking to one another. I think we can learn a lot from that type of interdisciplinary exchange. Not easy. We all know it's not easy. We all speak different languages, but I think that it's important for new understandings and visions of this changing Arctic. We learned some about the importance of history, not that any of us doubted it, but the paleoclimate record through sagas, through other type of historic records, understanding the past to be able to predict the future, I think, is another important theme that we've talked a little bit about at this conference and becomes all the more important in our work. I learned a lot from the paleoclimate, even though I'm the sole social scientist that sits in my program at the National Science Foundation that concentrates purely on Arctic research, funds Arctic research. We fund a fair amount of paleoclimate research, and it was really fascinating to learn about the Eemian and the ice cores, even though I've been hearing about it from my colleagues. I hadn't really thought about it in the same way as we talked yesterday, and what we can learn from those paleoclimate records that may be able to help us understand how the climate is going to be changing today. I talked a little bit about knowledge-based policies. I think that's important. I think governance in the Arctic is becoming more and more important issue. We heard from one of the secretaries. Basically, I would say the conclusion was Robert Frost's old poem, "Good fences make good neighbors." And I'd like to say that I think that we can probably do better than that. As the Arctic becomes more ice-free, as there's more development, I think we need to be thinking about more innovative ways in which the Arctic can be governed, how we can work more together, how co-management, we have co-management of some species, but I think that migratory species in particular, but I think that we should be thinking about new and innovative ways that we can all be working together and thinking together about Arctic spaces and about how those spaces might be governed in the future, and fences may not be the only model that we should be thinking about. I thought that the one, Trausti, who gave a very interesting talk, I thought about how there is this increasing importance and potential migration. I just wanted to mention that migration, possibly the World Health Organization is talking about 400 million people being displaced by the end of the century. Obviously, many of those people may be moving north for various reasons. And we need to think about the implications of that mass migration. It's not going to all happen at once, but we know quite a bit about what happens when people migrate. In the north, it's nothing new. Not only have people migrated for millennia, but certainly in the last century, a number of people were displaced from their homes, either through governmental policies or of their own volition. And so we have a fair amount of research, and I think that that research on migration could be very important for the global migrations and understanding the global migrations that are going to take place. The last thing I want to do is give a little bit of a plug. I'm rather envious of your MOU between Norway and Iceland for research and student exchange. And I'd like to say that at the National Science Foundation, we've been developing a new program called Science, Engineering, and Education for Sustainability. And underneath that broad umbrella, the acronym is SEES, S-E-E-S. Underneath that broad umbrella, we are developing a new program in the Arctic called Arctic SEES. I love acronyms, and Washington is madly in favor of acronyms anyway. If you go to nsf.gov, or we can talk about it, or you can send me an email, I'll leave some of my cards on the table. There are a lot of opportunities for collaborating, and in particular, I think that Arctic Seas initiative will offer more opportunities. The U.S. isn't very fond of letting people know that we can fund you. We can't fund your salaries, but we can fund your research participation. That is possible, and so we would like to be working together more in a collaborative way. We saw the oceanographic experience. Oceanographers are great at collaboration because their projects are so expensive. That's not the only reason. They're good sharers of data, et cetera, but it is one very basic material reason for why oceanographers have been very good at collaborating internationally. Getting ships is not cheap. You have to find them. You have to find a country that is willing to provide a ship for a particular cruise, et cetera. And I think we need to look at that model and be collaborating more internationally, and the National Science Foundation is actually becoming more open and funding more and more of these types of collaborations. And so I thought it was very interesting that Peter, I feel rather happy when he said one of the three areas, climate change and social impacts, natural resource development and governance, and those are the three main focus areas of the Arctic Seas program. And so I just want to say that we look forward to more collaborations. I think it's important and more interdisciplinary work. And as all of you were talking, I saw science everywhere, so I'll stop and let the next person make comments. But thank you very much. It's been a really interesting set of presentations.
Thank you so much, Anna. You always have so much insight. It's great.
Thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have you at this seminar. Now, I'm not sure what kind of interaction or contact we have with Reykjavik. And I'm sorry, I'm not even sure whether our other Anna Karlsdóttir, is actually there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Anna is here.
Anna is here. Anna, can you provide us with your insights and thoughts on to the panel?
I'm going to try quite brief.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes. I'm going to try to be brief. I think I not comment on identifying urgent research gaps in knowledge, since I presented some of possible implication of this to many aspects in my presentation. But I also want to say, like Anna, that I see a lot of opportunities to collaborate. But what I think I'll end is that I think in order to make local population more active in or aware of the complexities involved in the change, we, as researchers, contribute to build knowledge that modifies the nihilism of economic opportunities brought along with changes and following education economy.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I think most of what you said came across, although we're having some problems with the technology. Thank you, Anna. Next one to participate in the panel, Peter, would you come and enlighten us?
Just some few reflections. One thing is this more paradoxical aspects of what we have talked about, this climate determinism. Because on the one hand, it means that many people are worried and concerned about what is taking place. And on the other hand, as I said, many actors also perceive new opportunities. And these two versions, in some way, of climate determinism seems to be a kind of self-reinforcing spiral, in the sense that as people that are concerned spread their alarms and worries, then also attention is drawn to development in this region and the new opportunities that might be provided by melting ice and changing conditions. So it seems that they are, as I said, both are in some way leading to increased pressure, and that is some can talk about kind of paradoxical effect of it. Alarmism, on one hand, is also drawing attention of many other actors who are not concerned, but more are looking into the opportunities for exploitation of resources and opportunities in the region. Níels asked, where do we have gaps in knowledge, possible fields of cooperation, and so on. And I think, from my point of view, we have noticed that oil and gas and shipping has been studied quite extensively. When it comes to tourism and when it comes to fisheries and partly also mining, these are industries where important developments are taking place, and in spite of these social indicator projects that Anna has been involved with, I think there is still a lot to do to follow up, especially on tourism and fisheries, which are important aspects. And also another field is, of course, ocean governance, or this management of large ocean areas, which will be more and more important, and finding solutions there. And the role, for example, of Arctic Council is also a very important issue to focus on. And I think also to look into how knowledge is developed and applied in policy making and decision making in general, relating to the Arctic is interesting and important. And I also notice that, of course, there are some interesting parallels in more interdisciplinary terms. We had two presentations here, one about the invasion of goose, or some of the troubles related to geese, and on the other hand, the invasion of tourists. And if you think of those two projects, or those two studies, there are several similarities. You have no one has suggested we should start shooting the tourists, but in some of the challenges, raised by this study of goose and the study of tourists coming, and how they are in some way they are welcome, but they are also creating a lot of trouble and challenges. And there are, obviously, you see, you can draw links between such projects. And finally, I would say, because all these, or if you exclude more desktop research or social science research, all the other kind of research is very expensive, and using or having joint projects using the infrastructure and using that in a good way is I think very, very important. So these are my just some of the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Trausti Valsson, I think it's your turn. And Peter, thank you for bringing to our attention these parallels between geese and tourists. We will keep it in mind.
Well, thank you so much for these 2 days. We are coming from very different fields. Those who have been working on this, Norway and Iceland, obviously. And I think it's very important, this opportunity that we meet. For me, at least, it's the 3rd time now in a conference in Akureyri, and it has really been the key for me to observe what is going on. Because once something gets published, it's a time lag from the period when people are thinking about this. So you are get ahead in that. In terms of what Níels asked about, gaps in knowledge, I would say that, for instance, the Asia report of the climate impact assessment, that was a great event for all of us, and also the IPCC reports. They are the key. They are making projections on the climate and the impact on the natural world and partly the physical world, engineering aspects of it too. But now, as we have more or less, we're facing sadly that the Kyoto progress has broken down. That will demand new scenarios for the future, because Asia and the others, they have assumed that there will be mechanisms established in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And like Níels also said, the climate change is going to be the overriding factor in terms of the changes up there. And as it looks now, it's going to, we see it from the sea ice also here. It's at least it's an indicator. It could be just something that turns around for a while or whatever. It's quite possible that it will be, these changes will be much more rapid, and we need to get new reports that go into these scenarios, and also kind of spell out the consequences. But I, for instance, in my book, I took the predictions or the projections about about the changes in weather, how they impact changes in the natural environment and certain physical aspects. And then, as a planner, I think it's the first book ever published in the world. I have not come that takes it over to the development patterns, spatial development patterns, and so on. I was trying to explain it yesterday. And I think it's important. I would say it's a kind of a gap in the knowledge to really take these scenarios in climate and natural changes and take them further. And we will need to explore also other scenarios on a global scale. If it really gets very, very warm and the precipitation is getting less also in the very hot countries, lack of water is a major threat. Then we will have to face this, that there will be pressure to come north. Also for economical reasons, somehow, for instance, with all these troubles in Southern Europe, people are moving up. People are starting to learn more German, I've heard, and there is a report on the influence on this. I cannot remember the name of it for Britain, because people tend to try to go to a country where they know the language, and they are absolutely frightened by what could happen. They are expecting tens of millions coming up there. And maybe it will also happen here in Scandinavia, because we are now practically we have open borders now in Europe. And that would be my main things. I think I would like to stress.
Thank you very much, Trustee. The last person on the panel is Dr. Ingunn Tumbre, and I'm particularly interested in knowing whether she would be able to tell us a little bit about how to adopt methodology and theory from geese studies towards tourism to solve problems and issues.
Yeah, well, I can actually say that I have been involved in a project combining both, but then it was a look at the potential for goose safari, organizing on this coastal steamer, which was a large potential. And I think where I would put my comment in would be this knowledge gaps from a biologist point of view. I think most of areas in the Arctic, they are so remote areas, and there's so much basic knowledge from a wildlife point of view that we just don't know who are there, where are they, when are they there. And I think to manage these areas, you need that kind of basic knowledge in many ways. And then relating to tourists, it's I think tourist business is far ahead of the wildlife managers. They have been into new areas, they are out all the time. And in that relation, I also actually have a question for Anna in Reykjavik, because listening to your talk, it was extremely interesting. And I was wondering about, because in Svalbard, I know now that there are some new initiatives, that they are using tourist guides and boats more actively, because they are out there all the time, and many of the guides there, they are biologists, or they are quite educated people, and they do the reports, just new observations of rare bird species. I know there's a cooperation between the Polar Institute and some tourist companies in Svalbard to report sea mammals, for instance. So I was wondering if that could be a potential here, because that could, increase the knowledge, basic knowledge we have. And I think there's a large potential there, because they are out much more often than those managing these areas. So I was wondering if there's been any looked into that from in the studies you have been involved with, Anna. If she's still there.
Yes, I'm actually, I just didn't have time to talk about this, but in fact, Svalbard can in some ways be, I think, a role model to managing practices for the tourism development. And as I looked into as I was working with the megatrends, the part of the project that I was assigned to do, I realized that I think there's a need to extend the Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators Organization that actually was quite, I think, involved in the development of the management plan for Svalbard or Spitsbergen. And I know also for sure that there's an increased interest in developing management schemes from interests abroad. For instance, the European Arctic Tourism Organization has 2 years ago published a report addressing an urgent need to develop management practices, and but in their sort of version of or suggestions, the role model comes from IAATO, which is, I think, the organization involved in developing management practices for the South Pole. And I'm not knowledgeable to say if that is the model or the role model we need, but I think there is a raised awareness in general of the urgent need for this. And so in that respect, we have a project in front of us to collaborate on, I think.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could add to that, there's a lot more and more citizen science projects developing where citizens are given instruments, and a lot of that then interact through the web in terms of gathering basic information. And I was fascinated yesterday to learn the giving of instrumentation to hunters is an old practice, because there's an observation network of indigenous communities who are subsistence hunters and fishers, taking not just observations of animals, but also observations of the environment. And one of the websites, Aloka, which is the exchange of local observations and knowledge about the Arctic, which is specifically a website for these types of observations. And I think there are lots of indigenous groups, not only that are working on specific projects with scientists, but have been trained in how to use various observations. They're already out there and can become a part of anybody's scientific project. You know, people learned a long time ago they're not going to sit 360 days out of the year in the Arctic, but these people do in these remote locations. And so that's another great way in which not only to involve stakeholders in projects, but also for the scientists to gather information that's really important that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get.
Yeah, so I think that's also briefly into the one of the other questions here was also a comment to that, to use this, continue to use this traditional knowledge and look at it. There will be a seminar in Tromsø later this week on exactly this issue, but I think that is something for us, for all of us to keep in mind. Okay, so I think that is my comments to this, yeah.
Thank you, Ingunn. I believe we have come to the end of the program, and I must say that I don't feel that I'm entirely capable of a few, like, summing up words and the reason is that I spent most of my time yesterday flying from Reykjavik to Akureyri and came here shaken and stirred after successfully landing. But I do want to say that I think we have had a very constructive, fine discussion, fine seminar, fine presentations, lots of good ideas, and I think we're all on the same wavelength, so to speak, which doesn't come as a surprise with the very similar cultures and mindsets and indeed cultural heritage, which shapes how we perceive and how we relate to problems. Perhaps we are too much alike in a way, but still. But we do have these common denominators in terms of our environments. Of course, I do reject environmental determinism or reductionism, but we do have some common denominators which have to do with an interest in a healthy environment in terms of pollution issues and habitat destruction, and that's why I became particularly sort of worried when Anna pointed out that each cruise ship tourist emits 8 gallons of sewage per day, and if you start to run the numbers of that, it becomes quite a concern. It's just a tiny, so to speak, tiny detail, but put it in a wider context, some of the sort of optimism and the positiveness about having all these people coming to our end of the world is sort of, well, at least let's just say it opens up a whole new set of questions. And we also share the important issues of good governance and resource rights issues, whether it's in terms of national rights or local rights, and definitely the general sustainability issues. I mean, the idea of sustainable development is pretty much a Norwegian one, coming from the Brundtland report, and somehow it has dropped out of fashion. But it's always a very good concept to bear in mind, both as an analytical concept, but also as a moral concept, because it forces us to think. Well, it forces us to think of issues and processes in a holistic manner, how biophysical and social systems interact, but also in terms of equity issues, and both equity issues within generations that we belong to, as well as future generations. So, having said that, Astrid, I was wondering whether you might come and join me. I believe we need to return to Reykjavik and the Foreign Ministry, which has organized this seminar. So, Astrid.
Yeah. Yes, I think, well, I really feel that we've been moving out of the mists into the sunshine. Our keen-eyed guest noted that important word, interdisciplinarity. And I think although we come from different disciplines, I think we've communicated extremely well over these 2 days across the disciplines. And the weather gods have been teasing us a little bit. Perhaps that was our fault for making this allusion to the mists. But anyway, I'd like to thank all the speakers so much for their wonderful, fantastic talks, and all the guests as well, everybody who came to listen. And yes, thank you all so much. And also, not just for the presentations, but for everybody's graciousness and good humor, as I said, as the weather gods have teased us. So on that note, I'd like to so much thank the Ministry for organizing this meeting and for dealing with all the weather vicissitudes and making it all possible for us to be together, even though some of us were in the south and some of us in the north. Atli. Kæra takkir. Og takk fyrir komuna.
Thank you, Astrid. Thank you, Níels. And I'm just going to have it brief. I just wanted to thank you for all these interesting presentations with very wide range of topics. It actually comes as a surprise that Iceland and Norway are already collaborating so much, but obviously there are many opportunities that lie ahead. This MOU between Iceland and Norway that has supported this seminar might come of some help and support to all the interesting and important collaboration that lies ahead in the Iceland and Norway Arctic cooperation. On behalf of the Ministry, I thank you all for participating in this seminar. I hope it's only the beginning of a long and prosperous future that lies ahead. And hopefully all the participants coming from Norway will be able to, well, get their flights back to Reykjavik and all the way back to Tromsø in Norway. But I think it's a good time to end this now, so everybody can have their lunch. But yes, thank you very much. Goodbye, Akureyri.
Kæra þakkir.